And this computer thing really, really bothers me because we've all been living in homes for kind of, thousands or millions of years. And we have a good metaphor for the home, and it's the home. And I don't really understand why we can't use that one when it comes, just because we're connecting things up. This one is my actual home, and I dread having to log into it or become a super user and give someone else permissions, or that things might crash. I heard a story of somebody living in a demo a smart home in Denmark where the windows, they lost control of the windows, which were sort of opening and closing at random in the middle of the night, and the manual override had broken as well, so there was just no control of it. And I was like, what's worse, that or dumb windows? Now, the new systems I was talking about earlier, things like Wemo, some of these are lovely. All of these are clever. Some of them are lovely. But I think that there's still a bit of that. We haven't quite got past this metaphor that actually what's happening is that with something like Wemo, these are actual screenshots of the iPhone app, is that it's neat and it's better designed. But something like this is still essentially early adopter kit. This is not something you give to your granny and go like, right, you need to enable and disable things. You have to understand while loops and sort of if-then conditions and stuff like that to be able to turn the lights on and off. So the second challenge is that when you start putting sensors around the house, you end up with quite a lot of data. And sometimes that data makes visible things that you wouldn't otherwise have known about your house or what the other people in it are doing. And homes are kind of complicated social contexts, really. There's often more than one person living in them. There are interpersonal dynamics between those people. Sometimes they don't want the same things. And sometimes their relationships are made easier by the fact that perhaps there are certain things that they don't know about each other. And sometimes we consciously choose to ignore things. The problem is that when you start connecting everything up, you can see who's doing what. Even things like energy usage allow you to make inferences about what's going on. So you can see who's in and out, maybe. You can see who keeps turning the heating up all the time. Big bone of contention quite often. Who may have been up at 4 a.m. on the Xbox doing something they shouldn't have been. And so sometimes that surfaces sort of things like when people have different ideas about how things should be, sometimes that becomes much more apparent. One of the common examples we hear about with energy monitoring is that typically one person will take ownership of that and say, I want to save energy. And they may not be the same person as the person who uses the appliances. So they will say, every time we use the dryer, it costs us this much and we must get this cost down. And the person who's actually doing the washing will say, well, that's all very nice, but when was the last time you did the washing? So the third challenge is that most of what goes on in homes is actually quite boring and mundane, and that's okay. It shouldn't take up too much of our attention. We have routines that we don't think about for things like brushing our teeth and getting the breakfast and getting the kids to school, so that it can be done without too much conscious effort, unless something important or unusual or particularly interesting happens. The problem is that some of this connected home technology is designed to tell us how great it is and actually demand more attention. Now this is my washing machine, and it has the manners of a burglar alarm. So basically, when it's finished washing, if anyone here works for Bosch, but it does clever stuff, but it needs to shut up. When it's finished washing a load, it beeps, rather aggressively, but hey, whatever. And it doesn't stop beeping until you empty it. Now, maybe I'm particularly lazy or something, but I don't necessarily want to have to get the washing out right away. Okay, cool. You'll have to speed up. So this is appropriate behaviour from a burglar alarm. This is not appropriate behaviour from a washing machine. And imagine if you had a whole load of things in your home kind of behaving like this and kind of shouting for your attention all the time and finding new and interesting ways to break down. And that's what's wrong with this kind of computer metaphor type stuff, really, is it's demanding you to focus more attention on setting up the boring everyday things in your life when we need to be giving it less. Now this example is this is a prototype for an intelligent heating system called Watbox, which is a company that AlertMe acquired a couple of years ago. It's not out there in the market yet, but what this does is demand less of your attention. It monitors electrical activity in the home And so if it sees that you're using electricity above the base load, it assumes that you must be in and up and about and doing something. And so it uses that to try and set the heating so that you don't have to think about it. So the final challenge is that we don't really understand how to use a lot of the stuff in our homes anyway. So putting more controls and more intelligence and more connectivity in it sometimes doesn't necessarily make the problem easier. Now this guy is a ring-tailed lemur, and he understands heating systems about as well as the average human. There was a lovely example last year of in the news of some ring-tailed lemurs in a zoo in Somerset in England, who learned to turn up the temperature on the thermostat in their cage when it got cold. They come from Madagascar, and the keepers had set the temperature to what they thought would be a nice, comfortable Madagascan sort of temperature, and the lemurs kept getting in and sort of like cranking the thermostat up to the top. And this is what people do as well. I've been doing research into how people use heating, and one thing you hear an awful lot is people saying, oh, well, when the weather gets cold, you have to turn the thermostat up, which is wrong. Now, I don't know how many of you kind of, whether you think about thermostats in this way, but basically, a thermostat is not a valve. You turn it up more, you don't get more heating. What you've actually done is change the set point of the switch, so the thermostat will just turn on and off at a different point. And I was kind of had my head in my hands on this a bit. And then I met this lady who said, my thermostat is too confusing to use, so when I want to turn the heating up, I put it in the fridge. Now this woman understands how a thermostat works, Now, in fairness, most of the thermostats on the market are actually really horribly designed because the pressure, there's cost pressure to keep them down, so we end up with not enough buttons and crap screens and stuff like that. So it's fair, but it just shows that the mental models don't necessarily exist. And we often also hear that, and this makes the engineers I work with kind of just boggle, is that people do illogical things even though they know they're illogical. So burglar alarms is another example that most people are aware that somebody could break into your house in less than 10 minutes. But they won't bother setting the alarm if they're only going to work or they're only going out for a few hours. They know they could get broken into, but they just don't really kind of bother to use it somehow. Now, I did a longer version of this talk at the IA Summit, and there are some slides online where I go into more detail about how I think we need to think about user experience differently for connected homes. So I'll tweet that link later if anybody's interested. Please come and talk to me. Haven't got time to go into that stuff now, but I just wanted to run quickly through sort of some principles I think come from the challenges we've seen. So I think we need to stop treating the home as a computer and don't assume that life can be programmed, because most people can't do that and most people don't want to try. We need to try not to start any arguments when we're surfacing data, so new information, new types of control can just cause more complications in relationships. We need to remember that users almost always have something more important to do than setting the washing machine or turning the lights on and off. So stop trying to make it the most exciting thing, or taking the washing out. So stop trying to make it the most exciting thing ever, and think about how you can help them do more interesting stuff. And finally, we need to stop assuming that people already use the system that we're replacing in perfect, logical kind of ways. They will do strange things. We need to help them understand it better, but we also need to be forgiving when they don't do what we expect. And I'd like to leave you with one brilliant quote that I found when I was going through the academic literature on connected homes, of which there was quite a lot. And that was this: people don't want more control of their homes, they want more control of their lives. Thank you very much.
Claire, thank you so much. Do you have any questions? I'm sure we have.
Say if I'm wrong, but for me personally, I would prefer to have a system that that allows me to control my home when I'm actually not there. Yeah. So if I forgot, I don't know, to turn the heating off, or if I forgot to turn the gas off and I just left for a 2-week holiday, and stuff like that. Have you looked at doing it remotely from, when you're actually not in, and the system that allows you to control everything inside your house, like blinds, whatever, when you're actually not there? And the other the follow-up question is, when I am inside, can you please do something about the remote control for your TV? You know, please. Just, you know, I'm fed up with having 3 remote controls for all those bloody systems. So maybe there's a way, you know, that you can help me.
So to answer your first point, I may apologise if I didn't make it very clear. All of this stuff is controllable via web and mobile interfaces, which means that you have access to it wherever you are. So, for example, in the example of the heating system, if you go on holiday and realise you've forgotten to turn the heating off, you can do that from your phone wherever you are. So it is all remote. One of the challenges I have is reminding people that it isn't necessarily remote. So it might be easier to do something from on the sofa from your smartphone than it actually is to kind of walk over to the controls. On the remote control, the remote controls are a big old chestnut. And I don't work on any of those personally, but I know a number of people who've worked for companies like Philips over the years where they've tried to propose better designs for remote controls and come up with some lovely things. And what's tended to happen is that they've met as a company who will have said, that's fantastic, but it's going to cost us €3 to manufacture this remote. And we have a price point of €1 for a remote. So you end up with this, you know, it ends up, many people have tried and probably come up with quite good designs, but you know, for some reason the commercial pressure's there that works against it. Now, why, when you're spending hundreds of euros on a TV, you can't spend another 2 on a better remote? I have no idea, but you know, you're right.
Well, I guess you could make it a part of that application that you basically install for 50p, you know, on your smartphone, and you just do that.
Yeah, although, you know, at 50p, if I've just spent €600 on a TV, you know,
That's true.
it's like, just give it to me, please, you know.